friends, I'm Janine. I'm a world champion and professional Highland Games athlete. Today I'm going to take you through the events you're most likely to see at a Highland Games here in the United States. When we have a full heavy athletics competition at a Highland Games here in the States, that means we're contesting 9 events total. We have those grouped into distance events of the stones, weights for distance, and hammers, an accuracy event in the caber toss, and we have 2 height events, the sheaf toss and the weight over bar, or weight for height. We also call it the wob for short. Besides running through the events in that order, stones, weights, hammers, caber, sheaf, and wob, for the distance events, we also go through them with the heavy event version first and then the lighter one. Now for stones, we call the heavy version the Braemar stone, and the light version, we call it the open stone. So in a full heavy athletics competition in the United States going in traditional order, we're going to have the Braemar stone, open stone, heavy weight for distance, light weight for distance, heavy hammer, light hammer, caber toss, sheaf toss, and then we're going to finish the day with the weight over bar. Now, it's not uncommon for games to drop a couple of events for the sake of time. If they're going to drop 2 events, what I've seen most common is that they'll drop the Braemar stone and they'll drop the heavy hammer. So this happens at the games in my hometown, the Capital District Scottish Games every year. We go open stone, heavyweight for distance, lightweight for distance, light hammer. We take a break for lunch. We come back after everybody's had some beers and something to eat, and we go the caber toss, and then we finish with the height events. One of the ways that events might go out of this traditional order is you might see us, for example, flip-flop the height events. That's what we did at the last Capital District Scottish Games, at least for the women's class. A lot of times classes will just jump in when you have the standards that are free for the sake of time. They don't want us just sitting around and waiting for every class to finish the sheaf toss. The height events are going to be the events that take the longest in any games because every athlete in the class has up to 3 attempts to clear the bar. Once you clear a bar, you're able to go up and take up to 3 attempts at the next height. So often what you'll see at games is classes might flip-flop the height events just so they can jump in when standards are open so that they can get rolling on these events that can take so long. Now, keep in mind, this traditional order is not something that you're going to see at every games. I would say it's actually probably more common that I've gone in the events not in traditional order than actually gone in traditional order. And that's okay. One of the things though that is pretty standard is you're going to see the athletes contesting the heavy version before the light version for those distance events, particularly when they're contested one right after the other. And that's what we'll usually do. We'll start with the Braemar stone, we'll take our 3 attempts, and we will often roll right into open stone. Same thing for the weights and for hammers. Occasionally, we might take some warm-up throws between events, but typically speaking, you're gonna have a much shorter warm-up period, if anything, between the events, particularly for like the weight for distance and for the hammers. A lot of times you're gonna see the athletes roll right from one event into the other. And so if you're not paying attention, you might not even realize that we've switched implements until you start seeing them fly farther for the lighter version of the event. Now, if you remember at the beginning of this video, I mentioned that these are the ones that you're going to see at a games here in the US. Now, one of the events that if you're from Scotland or if you've only attended games in Scotland or in Canada that you might not recognize is the sheaf toss. This is a relatively uniquely American event. We contested at many events here in the US, although not every Highland Games has the sheaf toss here in the US. I've competed at a few games in Canada. At one of those in Victoria, the sheaf toss was actually an extra event that was for a special prize. And at the Moncton Games last year, which hosted the Masters World Championships last summer in June, we did contest the sheaf toss and there was a special prize for that, but it didn't factor into the overall finish for the standings for the championship. Now, you're always going to see the caber toss contested at the Highland Games. The only time there might be an exception to this is if the weather gets really bad, like if there's thunder and lightning, the conditions just aren't safe. And then if we don't contest the caber toss, really technically the marks aren't supposed to count for the event as far as our like national rankings and everything. I did a statistical analysis on my results towards the end of the year last year, and what I found is that the event that you see at nearly every games, other than the caber toss, is the weight over bar. So hey, if you're a Highland Games athlete, I highly recommend that you get really solid on your weight over bar technique because you're going to be throwing it everywhere that you compete, pretty much. I'm going to get up on my soapbox for a minute, not only as an athlete and a pro in the sport, but as a coach. And I'm going to say, I would really advocate if you're a Highland Games athlete here in the US to put the time in early in your career to get really good at the weight over bar. And here's a few reasons why. You're going to see it contested at practically every games that you compete at. Compared to the other events within our sport, I would argue that it's relatively easy to become proficient at the technique. And that's because the way I break the event down, there's only 4 steps to the movement. Once you've achieved a certain level of proficiency at it as well, I would argue that it requires relatively minimal practice to maintain that proficiency. Again, because that movement pattern is relatively simple, especially when compared with a lot of the other events that we have. Additionally, your feet don't have to move for the event when you do the standing weight over bar, so the weather or variable ground conditions aren't going to be as big of a factor for the event as they are for some of the other ones that we throw. And so on the whole, I would argue that there's a really good return on the investment of figuring out how to get really good at the weight over bar early on in your throwing career. Hey, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, like, comment, go ahead and share it. If you want to know more about anything that I touched on in this video, go ahead and ask me in the comments, and I'm more than happy to make some videos explaining other aspects of our sport, the Highland Games, and these festivals in general. And go ahead and follow for more Highland Games content. Thanks.